BXB. It's in the game!
Hello again, it's Christopher Goldthorne here once more with another review for BXB Games. Today we are looking at Fishing Sim World, developed by Dovetail Games, known for Train Simulator and its own related World game. Check the description to see Joel's review of that game. And released on September the 18th, 2018. When you load up the game for the first time, the second thing you'll see is the character creation screen. We'll get to the first thing you see later. The system of character creation is pretty generic and basic, with only 3 male models and 3 female models to choose from. They all look a little bit like they've had a fight and broken their nose, and they're not the most pleasing models to look at, but they certainly do their job. You then move on to the standard choices of hairstyle and clothes, and the options for this are pretty sparse, which leaves you with very little customization options. You can of course buy more choices with the in-game currency, but this is also designed to be spent on the all-important fishing equipment, so you need to factor that in before you purchase any serious bling. After you've decided who you are and what you look like, it's time to get out on the water and go fishing. If, like me, you have limited experience of fishing games, mine is limited to Magikarp farming in Pokemon, you may wish to go through the tutorials, understandably. But if you do, take a pen and paper with you, because they are video tutorials only. You sit and you watch as the instructions are reeled off, no pun intended, and you're just expected to remember them. Now, the game does offset this by having the controls on the screen, which is handy, but having the buttons there is one thing, knowing how to use them is another. This seems frankly a little lazy of Dovetail Games, and is surprising too, given that the tutorials in their other big IP, Train Simulator, are fully hands-on experiences. Now, armed with a notepad of buttons and controls, you can head out to a lake or a river somewhere in the world. Dovetail's usage of the word world has been called into question before. I direct you once again to Joel's review of Train Sim World. But I was excited to see that there are 7 different locales in which you can throw down your line. That's enough environments to have one from each continent, I thought to myself. Even if you do the realistic thing and forget the North and South Pole, you've still got room for the other 5 continents. I began to dream of fishing off the Great Barrier Reef, or perhaps the southern coast of South Africa, or even catching koi carp in a secluded Japanese forest. What I actually got was 2 lakes in the USA, a lake and a canal from Britain, yep, you heard that correctly, a canal, and 1 lake each from France, Germany and Austria. That's not the world, it's 2 continents, both in one hemisphere. I'm sure it wouldn't have been too impossible to include 1 lake from somewhere else, perhaps in place of the canal, and at least give some credibility to the world title. And another thing I want to mention very, very briefly about this game is that every time I turned it on, the Oculus Rift started. I don't know why, it doesn't have any VR support, and I couldn't see any reason for it to happen, but it did inexplicably. It may be something the developers need to look at in an update. Now we find ourselves in what I like to call the Dovetail Paradox, and it's a place that is well known to any who play their games. You see, despite everything I've said so far, we still haven't spoken about how good a fishing simulator it is. The fact is, once you get into the environments and start fishing, this is a pretty tight and well-made game. The actual act of casting your line is well implemented, and there are 2 different ways you can use your mouse to achieve the perfect cast, both of which are relatively easy to master and intuitive. You can also cast multiple lines at once to increase your odds of getting the catch of the day. You have to master different styles of fishing to catch all the different species, of which there are a considerable amount, and the amount of customization available in terms of rods, tackle, bait and other fully licensed fishing equipment is pretty deep, and this gives you a far better chance of netting the big fish. And catching the fish themselves takes just the right amount of effort on the player's part. You have to handle your rod correctly, making sure the line doesn't snap, or that you give the fish too much line so that it can become the one that got away. Actually landing a fish feels like an achievement, even to the point where I got properly annoyed when I caught 1 fish after a relatively intense battle that weighed a paltry 8 pounds. The environments you find yourself in are well designed and presented, and are genuinely detailed enough to become enjoyable to walk around and explore in their own right. The lighting and weather systems are realistic and well implemented, and the soundscapes perfectly capture that idyllic lake or riverside feeling you would expect during a day waiting for a bite. On the larger lakes, you can use boats to both travel around and as portable fishing platforms. The physics on the boats are a little stiff. The waters of the lakes seem to have very little effect on the craft at all. I'm not even sure I saw it bob on the waters once, but they do their job well enough. You can play both in a single-player career-style mode, where you take on the denizens of each lake either in free play or various tournaments where you race to catch the highest gross weight of fish and further your climb towards becoming a fully professional world-star fishing celebrity, or you can take your skills global against either your friends or players worldwide in very similar game modes. Now this last point brings you to a small nitpick which, while not exclusive to this review, does need addressing. You may remember that I said the character creation was the second thing you see when you start the game. The first thing you see is a sign-in screen for Dovetail Live, an online service provided by the developers that promises, quote, in-game rewards, store discounts, and more. Now this sounds exciting, but I personally have an issue with developers withholding so-called rewards to people who want to just play a game without inputting their email address. It is, of course, entirely skippable and doesn't truly impact on the gameplay, but it just sends a bad message, and it's something I wish that developers would stop doing. This is not a Dovetail or Fishing Sim World exclusive problem, but since it was so prominent in this particular game, I did feel it needed addressing. After all that, I'm going to give Fishing Sim World 3 stars. While there are issues with this game, the actual selling point, simulating fishing, is well delivered, and while it doesn't break any big molds, it does everything it needs to do competently and with little fuss. If you have enjoyed this review, or if you just enjoy the sumptuous sound of my baritone voice, you can find me as The Humble Gamer on both YouTube and Twitch at youtube.com/HumbleGamerTube and twitch.tv/HumbleGamerTwitch. And as always, please do come back to this YouTube channel for BXB Games for more great content.
BXB. It's in the game.